Thank you for inviting me to speak before the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States. I sincerely hope that any input will be useful in increasing the safety and security of our flying public. My name is Mike Canavan. From December of 2000 until October of 2001, I served as the Associate Administrator for Civil Aviation Security at the Federal Aviation Administration. Upon joining the FAA, my first order of business was to review our major mandates and policies and determine where immediate improvements to civil aviation security could be made, both short and long term. Since the FAA was a regulatory agency and not an enforcement agency, I knew a challenge would lie ahead to work with the airline industry and those outside the federal government, making sure every effort was made to ensure the security of the flying public. The challenge would come in terms of developing and reconstructing this long-established partnership. Additionally, outside the FAA, but within the federal government, I work closely with my counterparts within the counterterrorism and intelligence communities. While the FAA is considered part of the counterterrorism community and intelligence communities, it participated only when issues arose that involved aviation-related matters. It should be noted that the FAA was a consumer of intelligence and really not an intelligence collector. This is an important distinction as we relied completely on the intelligence community to provide the best quality of raw and analyzed intelligence so that, when appropriate, we were able to turn it into an actionable intelligence for which we could take corrective actions through employing countermeasures, transmitting advisories, warnings, etc. During my tenure at the FAA, my staff and I interacted routinely with the intelligence and law enforcement communities. We were advised of current and possible future threats against civil aviation and worked actively to implement measures to protect the flying public against those threats. Throughout 2001, as the intelligence reporting volume increased, the overwhelming majority was focused on likely targets overseas, particularly in the Middle East. Throughout this period, my office issued at least 15 information circulars to authorize aviation industry, security professionals, corporate security directors, senior management personnel, ground security coordinators, and supervisory personnel at overseas locations, and as appropriate, to local airline managers and law enforcement personnel on a need-to-know basis. Oftentimes, these were issued in concert with Department of State public announcements and FBI national law enforcement transmittals. Information circulars contain data derived from law enforcement and intelligence information, focusing on domestic and international terrorism threats directed against aviation. The information circulars updated U.S. carriers against continuing violence against American citizens and interests around the world, with a particular emphasis on the Middle East, and encouraged airlines to practice a high degree of awareness. For example, one information circular described a plot to target a public area in the Los Angeles airport terminal by Ahmed Rassam, who was arrested in December 1999 while attempting to enter the United States from Canada. Another information circular issued in the summer of 2001 updated airport security personnel of the developments of terrorists and criminals had in disguising firearms. Additionally, my organization within the FAA issued security directives which require the airlines and security organizations to implement modifications or upgrades to their current security postures based on a variety of factors, including changes in the threat environment. The threat environment throughout 2001. As I recall, the threat reporting during early to mid-2001 centered on U.S. targets abroad. In June and July of 2001, the FAA was included in many interagency counterterrorism security group meetings, or CSG, held at the White House by the National Security Council staff regarding possible attacks in the Arabian Peninsula, Israel, and Europe. In early July, the NSC chaired a meeting at which the interagency was briefed about additional intelligence indicating that terrorist attacks seemed imminent. The intelligence community briefers emphasized attacks would likely take place overseas. While we all agreed that attacks within the U.S. could not be ruled out, there was no indication from the intelligence community that attacks focused specifically against airlines. Nonetheless, the entire CT community, including law enforcement and intelligence agencies, were placed on the highest alert And we all sent out notifications for heightened security measures to be put in place immediately within our organizations. The FAA sent out security directives and information circulars to all interested parties. During my 10 months at the FAA, I was determined to instill a renewed sense of dedication and importance throughout the civil aviation security organization and the airline and airport industry that security of the flying public was our principal directive. A few examples include traveling to every CADX airport, that's our largest airports, or 20, briefing all civilian aviation security, airline and airport staffs regarding commitment to aviation security, and traveling to several international airport locations to ensure that host nations understood the U.S. government's commitment to civil aviation security. I also made it a priority to draft and obtain buy-in from all FAA civil aviation security staff and agents on a strategic plan that articulated our security mission from the present forward. Additionally, I directed my policy staff to develop a long-term strategy planning effort out to the 2010 timeframe. In the short term I served at the FAA, I firmly believe we began improving the state of the FAA civil aviation security posture. Some suggestions for aviation security improvements. Of course, it is one's hope to deter, disrupt, or prevent every criminal or terrorist attack on the ground or in the skies. While this is the ultimate goal to which we all aspire, realistically, this cannot happen as long as we continue to live in a free and open society. We must therefore strike a balance that allows a free and open society with sound and common sense approaches to security. There are some aviation security programs that deserve attention and may provide improvements to the flying public. For example, the use of red teams. During my tenure at the FAA, I supported completely the concept of the red team to test and evaluate the overall state of readiness to domestic and international airports. From my time in the military, I was used to this thing that we do call red teams. Although no airport security system can be flawless, in order to develop and implement improvements, it is necessary to work with rather than to punish airport and airline personnel when defects are found by the red team. But you need to develop an improvement plan together. We are the experts. Based on the red team findings, the airport authorities and airline industry should be made part of the improvement process rather than be punished with fines, only with fines, and then allowed to walk away without making the overall system better. This is another example why it is an imperative that airline industry never be allowed to transfer all of its security responsibilities to the federal government. This must always be a shared responsibility. Federal air marshals. The strength of this program's foundation is based on maintaining the anonymity of the FAMs. With a significant increase in FAMs deployed on domestic flights over the past 20 months, the FAMs are now are more likely to be called upon to deal with unruly passengers as they are a threat to the cockpit crew and perceived threat to the cockpit crew and passengers. There is an important distinction between security of the aircraft, its crew, passengers, versus a disorderly passenger. Disclosing the FAM's identity undermines the very premise under which they are operating. This is another example where the airline industry should share responsibilities by handling unruly passengers, then the FAMs only to be used at the last resort. Then the FAMs are allowed to execute their mission in providing security of the aircraft, its crews, and its passengers. Airline industry responsibilities. Since September 11th of 2001, the federal government has taken additional responsibilities, which had been previously air carriers and operators' responsibilities for more than 3 decades. It seems there is little burden sharing. The concept of shared responsibility for good security is sometimes a memory. The airport and airline personnel are the first responders by virtue of their being the eyes and ears on the ground at these airports. They will be immediately directly aware of questionable behavior and potential threats. Now, however, the airline industry is no longer responsible for screening passengers and are currently trying to relieve themselves of caps and baggage screening and are opposed to using hardened containers or advanced equipment as a few examples. The airlines must be responsible for some measure of security throughout this process. The government cannot and should not be held accountable for all things aviation. The concept of common and shared responsibility for security can be degraded in this manner. Aviation security abroad. At international airports, foreign governments and airlines hire the personnel responsible for screening in overseas locations. While we may have made significant improvements domestically, we may not have yet dealt with the airports abroad. I understand that a recommendation was made to employ more than 70 explosive trace detection devices in airports overseas to screen footwear after Richard Reed's failed attempt last year to explode an aircraft has yet to be acted upon. This equipment is used domestically, and we should improve our aviation security overseas for flights to the United States and elsewhere. When I joined the FAA, I was impressed with many of the dedicated employees at the headquarters and in the field. However, I recognize I would be facing a formidable challenge working within the FAA structure and at the same time in an environment where partnership with the industry took on a whole new meaning. I tried to begin breaking new ground during this time. Not a single day passes when I do not think about decisions, theories, and intelligence that might have possibly made some difference to the outcome of September 11th. I hope that my testimony today and any information that I offer the National Commission will assist in making the traveling public and aviation in general more safe and secure. I take full responsibility for any and all FAA security failures on 11 September 2001. Thank you.